As NBA fans, we always hear about who's going to win the MVP award, talks of players leading the way in the MVP race, but rarely do we discuss players who have lost the MVP award. Times where a player was the clear frontrunner and then due to injury or a massive slump in their game, they completely fell out of the race. Last season, Joel Embiid was the MVP favorite for the first half of the season, and then he got injured, missed 3 weeks of the season, and his MVP case never recovered. He played just as well when he came back from his injury, and he would eventually finish second in MVP voting. But unfortunately, finishing in second place doesn't come with a shiny trophy. Another MVP frontrunner this season is Kevin Durant, but he just suffered an MCL injury and is now projected to miss 4 to 6 weeks of action. As incredible as he's been this season, his MVP case has basically vanished in the blink of an eye. This is the difference between winning the MVP award and having just another great season. But I don't know which is worse, losing an MVP due to injury, something that's completely out of your control, or falling into a slump so bad that your name is virtually revoked from the MVP ballot. It takes everything to win an MVP, but it takes very little to lose one. And right now, Stephen Curry is setting a prime example of this. After breaking the NBA's all-time three-point record, it seems like Curry has spent the last 2 weeks doing his best reenactment of Space Jam. No. The other one. His powers have been stolen from him, like he's been nerfed by the basketball gods. The man is going through a slump, and it may just cost him an MVP award. But he's not the first to experience this. Today's video is brought to you by SeatGeek. With live events making a comeback and a new NBA season upon us, SeatGeek is here to get us back in the action. Check this out. Just download the SeatGeek app and use promo code Jimmy to get $20 off your first order. SeatGeek makes buying tickets easier than ever with a rating system that lets you know which tickets are a good deal and which tickets are a bad deal. If it's green, that's a banger. You're getting a good deal there. Red? Not so much. I've been using SeatGeek for years. It's simple, it's easy, and it's a surefire way to get the best deal for your tickets. Whether it's a concert, basketball game, football, baseball, festival, SeatGeek's got it all. Download the app, use promo code Jimmy, and get $20 off your first order today. In 2002, the NBA was a completely different place. Hand checking was still allowed, teams averaged only 95 points a game, and the Kings were a 61-win team. Boy, how the times have changed. The face of the NBA at the time was Shaquille O'Neal, on a quest to lead the Lakers to their third straight championship. That season, Shaq was second in points per game, led the league in PER, box plus minus, and win shares. The dude was unstoppable, and he started the season with a streak of games that put him on top of the MVP leaderboard. In the first 9 games of the season, Shaq averaged 30 and 12 a game while leading the Lakers to a 9-1 record. He was even shooting 60% from the line, an excellent rate for the Diesel. The season just started and the MVP award was already his to lose. And that's exactly what happened. Because after getting out to a hot start, Shaq would go on to have the worst stretch of games of his prime. The next 6 games, Shaq would go on to average just 16 points and 8 rebounds while shooting 34% from the line. His average game score fell from a ridiculous 23.6 to just 13.9. And quickly, the narrative around the MVP discussion shifted. The door opened for another player to step up and take the top spot. That player being Tim Duncan. In an 82-game season, a short slump can completely derail an MVP campaign. 16 and 8 a game is nothing to laugh at, unless you're supposed to be the best player on the planet, in which case even the slightest blip in your dominance will have the masses turning against you. And this is the current situation Stephen Curry is in. After starting the season on a mission leading the Warriors to a 27-7 record while averaging 28 points per game and setting a new all-time three-point record, it seemed like the MVP race was a race for second. Steph had once again won the hearts of fans around the globe and continued to raise the bar game after game. And then, in his 34th game of the season, Steph had his first truly bad game. 9 points on 12% shooting from the field. 1 for 10 from downtown. Steph finished the game with a game score of just 3.7. Easily the worst performance of, to that point, a historic season. But no worries, even the best players have bad days. Except in their very next game, Steph had another awful night on the court. 14 points, shooting just 6 for 34 from the field, and sinking just 1 of his 9 attempted threes. The Warriors lost by double digits, and Steph finished with a game score of -0.1. Statistically, his worst game in nearly a decade. Just 2 bad games and the MVP race already begins to shift. But Curry's struggles did not end there. Just 8 days later, Steph scored 12 points on just 11 shots. And the very next night, he scored 19 points on decent shooting splits, but nowhere near his usual standard. In Steph's last 6 games, he has averaged just 18 points per game while shooting 34% from the floor and 26% from 3, with an average game score of 11.2. His numbers through the first 33 games of the season looked like this. This is all it takes for a player to go from the clear frontrunner for the MVP award to 7th place. The culmination of 6 mediocre games, and the MVP award is completely up for grabs again. And a rapid turn of events like this really makes you think about how fragile the state of the NBA hierarchy really is. The consistency of all-time great players is incredible, to the point where even a handful of bad games can change the perception of that player, or at least the season they're having. When an MVP award can completely change a player's legacy, and a streak of bad games can cost a player an MVP award, it kind of makes you look at the whole thing from a different perspective. Not only does an MVP have to play like he's the best player in the world, he has to do it every single night. If Steph wins another MVP this season, you would have a hard time not putting him amongst the 10 greatest players of all time. But without the award, he is still on the outside, looking in. And this may just be the case all because of a short stint of bad games. Consistency is key, and a great example of consistency is Kevin Durant, who may just be one of the most consistently great players in NBA history. In fact, at his worst, he's still better than most players could ever dream of being. The worst stretch of games Kevin Durant has had throughout his prime years came in the 2016-2017 season, when he averaged just 20.3 points per game while shooting 30% from 3 for an 8-game stretch. Throughout these 8 games, KD had an average game score of 16.7, which is still really good. For perspective, this season Devin Booker is slated to be an all-star. His average game score this season is 15.9. Kevin Durant, at his absolute worst, is still more productive and efficient than a prime Devin Booker. And no one is immune to a bad slump. LeBron James has had one, and unfortunately for him, it couldn't have came at a worse time. In 2011, LeBron was at his absolute peak, and through the first 3 rounds of the playoffs, he proved his dominance by averaging 26 points per game and leading the Heat on a 12-3 run to the finals. And then, the collapse happened. After cruising through the first 3 rounds of the playoffs, LeBron's numbers plummeted in the finals, from 26 points per game to just 17.8, his average game score falling from 22 to just 13. His plus-minus going from 5.3 in the first 3 rounds of the playoffs to -6 in the finals. LeBron's collapse came at the worst imaginable moment. In fact, LeBron's prime has now been taking place for 16 years. This 6-game stretch in the finals is easily the worst stretch of games in that 16-year span. Every player goes through a slump, but very few have fallen apart this bad in the finals. And it's a slump that stains LeBron's legacy to this day. And some of you are probably thinking, what about MJ? If everyone goes through these slumps, what's the worst one Jordan has ever experienced? Well, I searched. I scoured for the worst stretch of games of Michael Jordan's prime years in the NBA. And what I found was actually not that surprising. In his last season with the Bulls, at the ripe old age of 35, Michael Jordan had a 12-game stretch that ended up being the worst of his entire career up to that point. Throughout this stretch, MJ shot 45% from the field and shot just 13% from 3. And he still averaged 23, 6, and 4 a game while leading the Bulls to 10 wins and just 2 losses. His average game score throughout that stretch was 17. Which means that 2 months away from his second retirement, at 35 years old, in his worst stretch of games up to that point in his career, MJ was still better than most All-Stars are in their absolute prime. Like I said, not surprising. But hey, there may still be hope for Stephen Curry's MVP campaign, and Allen Iverson is proof of that. Back in 2001, right as Iverson was ascending the ranks of NBA greats, he hit a bit of a roadblock. An 8-game stretch at the beginning of the season where he only averaged 18.9 points per game while shooting just 38% from the field. He was struggling to get to the line and had an average game score of just 10. And considering that the average game score across the NBA is 10, Iverson was literally playing like an average player. But by the 14th game of the season, Iverson got his powers back, and everything changed. In the last 58 games of the season, AI went on to average 34 points per game while shooting 49% from the field. His free throws went through the roof, he became a fan favorite, and the Sixers finished the season with the best record in the East. His average game score skyrocketing to 21.4. So it is possible to go through a dry spell in a season and still win the MVP award. I mean, it may take one of the most spectacular stretch of games to make up for the bad ones, but spectacular is Steph's middle name. Actually, Stephen's middle name is Stephen, but that's neither here nor there. With Kevin Durant out for the next 4 to 6 weeks, it looks like, at the moment, the MVP is a toss-up between Giannis, which would be his 3rd MVP in 4 seasons, and Nikola Jokic, who would be the first center in 40 years to win back-to-back MVPs. In a season where LeBron is playing like he's 25, Kevin Durant has hit his 3rd peak, and Stephen Curry has officially become the three-point god, it's looking like none of these all-time greats will go home with the coveted award. As NBA fans, we have a very short attention span. We see something we like, we praise it, we create unrealistic expectations, and then when a great player inevitably fails to meet these absurd expectations, we're quick to find the next best thing. And the fact that a player can go from the clear favorite in the MVP race to nearly being out of the race in just 6 games is proof of that. Hope you all enjoyed, and as always, until next time.